Hello and welcome to this webinar. My name is Javnyuy Joybert, and I am a doctoral candidate in business administration with specialization in entrepreneurship and investment with Kesmonds International University, America. This webinar is part of my doctoral program uh, 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 assignment. You can say that with KIU. And today I'll be talking about the course organizational development and change management. I want you to note that many of the examples that I will give throughout this webinar session will focus on the African market and many a times specifically to Cameroon, the Cameroon market. Because let's start by looking at what is organizational change. Organizational change is the movement of an organization from one state of affairs to another. And a change in the environment often requires change within the organization operating within that environment. For example, the change in the last year as a result of the COVID-19 has caused organizations to start pushing for digital transformation. That is a change. Change in almost any aspect of a company's operation can be met with resistance to change. And different cultures can have different reactions to both the change and the means to promote the change. For example, there is a way young people, millennials, can react and promote change. There's a way that the elderly people in the workplace can promote and react to change. And organizational change looks both at the process in which a company or an institution changes its operational methods, technologies, organizational structure, or even the whole structure or strategies, as well as what affects these changes have on it. That's why organizational change usually happens in response to or as a result of external or internal pressures. There are external pressures that can cause organizational change. For example, the COVID-19. For example, change in political power. For example, flood. For example, change in customers' behavior. For example, change in the CEO. These things can all lead to organizational change. Now, what is organizational development? Organizational development is an effort that focuses on improving an organization's capability through the alignment of strategy, structure, people, rewards, metrics, and management process. And another school of thought says that it is a science-backed and interdisciplinary field rooted with psychology, culture, innovation, human resource management, change management, organizational behavior, research analysis, design, and among many others. So these various fields of studies or disciplines also contribute to organizational development. And organizational development makes organizations look at the bigger picture and address changes that are needed in order to drive progress and change. And it will look at the company objectives, its strategic direction, structure, as well as the culture, and create the processes for sustainable long-term success. So organizational development is all about driving progress and enhancing change. And if an organization is looking to grow and develop, it is and this executive or the management team or the board of directors, they are wondering how they are going to start. It is imperative to look for organizational development experts who will provide the framework and the process required to power that growth via the human assets, the human resources within the business. And there is a difference between organizational change and organizational development. And I want to talk about two major differences. Organizational change management is about an organization achieving a desired future state from its current state with minimal disruption or negative impact to the organization. Whereas organizational development is about how an organization achieves its purpose through its design, function, structure, and processes. Or in simpler terms, organizational change includes changing organization structure, technology, and process and business model to gain competitive advantage. Meanwhile, organizational development is a planned effort taken to increase the organization's effectiveness and implement the organizational change. And there are 5 stages of organizational development. Number one is what is called entry and contracting. This is a stage whereby authenticity, presence, and empathy are key components in this particular stage. This is where during the initial conversations, the organizational development expert or the consultant build trust through conversations by listening to the stakeholders in the organization with no judgmental mentality and just offering support to this particular set of people. Then they move to stage two, where you can call sensing and discovery. Here, information is collected as like we mentioned in stage one, and data is collected. Dialogue, surveys, interviews, assessment tools, focus groups are used to collect information and also build relationships. Then you move to stage three, where it is diagnosis and feedback. This is where the expert diagnoses the data collected through dialogue, the interviews, the surveys, the assessment tools, the focus groups. And, and the experts and the organization, employees or management can explore a gap analysis between the current situation and the desired situation as a result of the data collected. And number four is where planning for intervention and action takes place, because feedback leads to a blueprint for change and collaborative action planning. Action plans are broken down into small steps with accountability structures or accountability partners, like which include who is taking responsibility for what, and dates are agreed for completion. And number five, of course, is evaluation of the organizational development process and closure. And if there's a need again, the same process is repeated. Now, what is the purpose of organizational development? The process of organizational development focuses on a number of areas of enterprise, operation, providing analysis and recommendations for change. Therefore, the purpose of organizational development is one, to enhance growth in the organization. Number two, to improve the work processes. Number three, enhance product innovation. Number four, push for employee development. And number five, enhance employee experience. So could be, these are some of the major reasons or the purpose behind organizational development. And organizational development cannot be successful without the competence or the core skills. The person, meaning that the person driving organizational development, need to possess some of these skills. Number one, that person needs to be a systems change leader. What does that mean? This is somebody who can comfortably work within a whole system and advise on strategies, organizational change, transformation, and alignment. For example, the person should have a good knowledge in finance, sales, marketing, technology, employee management, and so on. It's very important. The second skill is culture builder. The person should be a culture builder. That is somebody who fosters commitment and engagement based on an environment of trust and promotes the health and vitality of the organization. Number three is the person needs to be an innovator. This is somebody who sponsors, develops, and can challenge the organization and employees to create strategies for disruption, breakthroughs, transformation, and innovation itself. And number four is the skill of efficient design. The person pushing for organizational development should be an efficient designer. This is someone who strives for simplicity, design strategies, interventions, and processes to facilitate a desired business outcome with the client and end user in mind. Number five is data synthesizer. We cannot talk about organizational development skills without talking about data. Data is a very important component in organizational development. And anybody driving organizational development should be very good with data. This is somebody who operates as an integrator, connecting multi-stakeholder views, perspective, translates data or information, and create clarity, commitment, and make informed decisions. Number six should be a results-driven oriented leader. This is someone who understands and applies the principles of customer service, result, sets challenging goals, pushing for results, measures the impact, and project return on the investment. Now, how can we as entrepreneurs, executives, professionals implement organizational change? Number one is management support for change. Employees develop a comfort level when they see management supporting the change process. They see the CEO, the COO, the CFO, the board of directors, the board president, all in to support the change. It's very important. Number two is make a case for the change. No one wants to change for change's sake. So it is important that if you are pushing for change, create a case for change. A case for change can come from a different source. It can be as a result of data collected. You can collect data and talk to an employee and make a case to them. Hey, look at this data. Look at the sales. Sales are not good. So we need to change and do this. Let them see why you are pushing for change. Make a case for change. Number three is employee involvement. All change efforts should involve employees at some level. The next one is communicating the change. Communicating change should be structured and systematic. Yes, there should be a process to communicate change. It could be like start by sending emails, start by sending text messages, start by calling, start by having a general meeting, and continue by having a one-on-one meeting with the staff. This could be a systematic process to communicate the change. Next is implementation. Once change is planned, it is important to have a good communication about the rollout and the implementation of the change. A timeline should be made for the implementation of change, and there should be accountability partners with deadlines who can track the implementation of this change. Next is follow up. Of course, whenever change is made, it's always good to follow up after implementation and assess how change is working and if the change delivered the results that were intended. The last point is removing barriers. Of course, sometimes employees encounter barriers when implementing change, and it is management responsibility, it is the change leader's responsibility to ensure that employees can implement change without obstacles and resistance. That was not the last, of course, celebrate. It is important to celebrate successes along the way as changes are being made. Celebrating the small changes and building momentum for bigger changes are what makes employees want to participate in the process. What are the benefits of organizational change? Why should a startup push for organizational change? Why should a business, an SME, a corporate structure push for organizational change? Number one, organizational change lead to retaining a competitive advantage, a competitive edge. It enables the organization to be a step ahead. Number two, help the business to remain relevant in that particular business sector. Number three, it encourages innovation. Number four, it leads to the development of new skills. Yes, there's a way change is pushed and the team can learn new skills to be able to participate with the change and post-change. Next, develop staff and leads to better business opportunities and improve the staff morale because people love to be in a growing environment. Now, let's talk about transformational change. This is a very important concept that cuts across organizational development and organizational change. Transformative change is a philosophical, practical, and strategic process to effect revolutionary change within the organization, what you can call culture transformation. It is a systems approach applied to broad-based change to catalyze rapid shift, just from the word transformation, right? To catalyze rapid shift in the mental constructs, inhibiting solutions to complex problems, or in the organization's culture that prevents it from realizing its full potential. Yes, so this transformative change can be to cause a shift in the thinking process of employees, to cause a shift in the process how employees solve problems, cause a shift to push their mind to think in abundance and be highly innovative and push for greater results. That could be transformational change. Now, how can a business implement transformational change? Transformational change in business doesn't happen by accident. It requires planning, good implementation, and follow-up among other things. And there are 5 stages of transformational change. Stage one is setting performance and wider organizational goals. Yes, you need to set performance goals and wider organizational goals. Not stage two is assessing the capability of the organization. Is Does this organization have the capabilities to make this kind of transformational change? Number three is designing the initiatives that will complete the transformation. Transformational change on its own will not be effective, but there are initiatives. For example, you can organize a design thinking workshop, which is an initiative that will lead to transformational change in the organization. You can organize for travel exposure. Let your team travel to a bigger company and see how they're doing things that can cause transformation. Stage four is executing the initiatives. You can design the design thinking workshop and bring a design thinking expert who can train your team on how to be design thinking practitioners. Stage five is sustaining the initiatives and the changes achieved. So these are the 5 stages that anybody can go through and implement transformational change in the organization. And there are 4 key actions that have positive effect on transformational change. Number one is effectively communicating the transformational change. Number two is actively leading the transformational change. Number three is empowering the employees to be informed about the transformational change and giving them skills and capabilities that they need to lead the transformational change. Number four is establishing and maintaining a culture of ongoing improvement. Let the employees know that there's this culture of consistent improvement in the organization. Now, it is important to also talk about best practices in an organization because best practices cut across organizational change and development. And an organization with poor best practices will always struggle to attain a certain level of result. And as an executive, as an entrepreneur, how can you implement best practices? Do your homework. Do your homework. Research best practices of other companies, both inside and external to their industry, and learn how they get things done. It's very important. Number two is communicate, communicate, communicate. It's very important. Communicate with your employees about the best practice initiatives. Metrics, how are you going to measure the best practice? How will you know that the best practice is recording results? You need metrics in place to measure against it. Number four is change management, of course. Have a change management component in place prior to the implementation of the best practices. Because any best practice that is well implemented will cause change in the organization. How will you handle employees' reaction towards the new best practices? Next is getting everyone involved. You need to get the employees involved in the process. After all, the employees are the ones that will be affected by the new best practices that you are implementing as the executive. And next, the last one is keep evaluating and refining. Once the new best practice have been implemented, work is not done. It is important to continuously evaluate and refine the best practice to keep meeting the changing needs of the business. Let's talk about culture. Organizational culture is one of the most incredible business concepts and practices that have huge impact in any organization. An organization's culture defines the proper way to behave within the organization. Culture consists of shared beliefs in the organization, values established by leaders, founders, and then communicated and reinforced through various methods. These methods could be onboarding sessions, code of ethics, and employee handbooks, and so on. And ultimately, these shape the employee perceptions, behaviors, and understanding about the organization. And what are the 5 reasons that culture can change? There are many other reasons, but I like to talk about these ones that are very practical. What can lead to change in the organizational culture? Number one, a new CEO can cause organizational culture to change because the CEO brings their leadership style and their cultural style, right? Next is merger and acquisition. There's a way 2 companies can merge together and form one company. Automatically, culture will change and a new culture will be born. Next is changing customer requirements. Yes, there's a way customers' buying behavior can change or requirements can change, and it affects the culture of the organization. Disruptive change in the market the companies serve. Yes, when there's a change in the market that the company is serving, culture can be affected. Globalization, yes, globalization is seriously affecting organizational culture nowadays. So, how can an executive, how can we change culture in an organization when we notice that uh, culture is imperative? Number one, you need to define the desired values and behavior. What are the values and behaviors you would like to see the team embody? That's the first step to changing organizational culture. Number two, align that culture with strategy in place and processes. Let there be a connection. For example, let's say the culture is that of punctuality. Let there be a clear alignment between punctuality and the strategy and the process of the business. Next is connect the culture to accountability. Let there be a system in place that can hold staff members accountable when they fall short of the organizational culture. Next is define the non-negotiables. Determining what is not up for debate is particularly very important. Next is don't rush it. Changing a culture can take sometimes months and several years to get it done. And as the person leading this, you need to be bold to lead. Boldness and courage is very important in pushing for culture change in the organization. Types of organizational culture. Number one is the clan culture. This culture is rooted in collaboration. An organization practicing the kind of culture, it means that members share commonalities and see themselves as part of one big family who are active and involved. Leadership takes the form of mentorship, not shouting, right? Not being or using a bossy mentality. Next is advocacy culture. This culture is based on energy and creativity, right? Employees are encouraged to take risks and leaders are seen as innovators and entrepreneurs. Like most tech companies use this kind of culture, like Apple, Facebook, and so on. Next is the market culture. This culture is built upon the dynamics of competition and achieving concrete results. The focus is goal-oriented with leaders who are tough and demanding. The organization is united by a common goal to succeed and beat all rivals and beat all competition. Next is hierarchy culture. This culture is founded on structure and control. Many corporate companies use this culture. The work environment is very formal with strict institutional procedures in place for guidance. Leadership is based on organized coordination and monitoring with a culture emphasizing on efficiency, no mistakes, no room for mistakes, efficiency at all times. What are the levels of organizational culture? Yes, culture can be in level. Level one is the artifacts. The visible manifestations of culture, for example, dress code and decor, right? And for example, this is how we dress in this organization. This is a level one of culture. Number two is espoused values. How an organization explain its culture. For example, official policy and accepted benefits discovered through why question. Or here also can be through employee handbooks. They give an employee handbook and it tells you this is the culture of this organization. They give you a code of ethics or a document to explain officially the culture of the organization. Number three is shared tacit assumptions. The hidden assumptions, values, and beliefs. They understood traditional and official ways of being and doing and feeling. There's a way that you just see this organization and you know this is how they behave. It is because there's a way that they have been initiated or baptized or that the culture have been inducted into them. Now, why is employee culture important? Employee culture is important to employees because workers are more likely to enjoy work when their needs and values are consistent with their employers because there's that clear connection. Like, for example, with the help of employee handbook, code of ethics, culture manual, and so on, there's always a sync between employees and the employer. And if you work somewhere where the culture is a good fit, you will tend to develop better relationships with their co-workers and be more productive in that organization. So how do you assess organizational culture? Number one, evaluate your onboarding process. Yes, how do you bring new staff into the team? Do you think that you have a good onboarding system? It's very, very important. Number two, observe team interactions. And you can observe team interaction by asking the following four questions. Number one, do they respect one another's ideas and opinions? Do they relate on interpersonal level? Do they function cohesively as a team? Does the setting promote a free change of dialogue and unique perspectives? Good. So review feedback from clients and check customer experience. Yes, how clients are talking about employees, how clients are talking about their experience in buying from you or using your service. You can also use that to assess the organizational culture in place. To conclude, organizational change and organizational development are critical growth elements of every successful organization. Effective implementation always yield productive results, both in the short term and long term. Thank you so much for following the webinar. God bless you.